Hi, I'm Ping Lu. Today, Jazz Ang and I will present our work titled, In This Online Environment, We're Limited, Exploring Inclusive Videoconferencing Design for Signers, on behalf of our co-authors, Emma McDonnell and Sarah Coppola. American Sign Language is the deaf community's primary language, and it is an independent visual spatial language that shares no grammatical similarities to English. ASL is centered on deaf culture and identity. Freelance community ASL interpreters traditionally work in person. However, they've had to shift their work to unfamiliar remote interpreting environments due to the pandemic. Existing assistive technology for DHH signers tends to center on automating sign language interpretation. This means the solutions force adoption of hearing society's dominant language rather than promoting equitable participation for signers. As the previous slides mentioned, the prior work has a very limited understanding of real-time computer-mediated ASL communication through interpreters, and it does not specifically target signers and their unique requirements for inclusive interaction experience design. Similarly, little is known about freelance community ASL interpreters' use of video conferencing platforms. We seek to fill a gap in literature, and this led us to two guiding research questions. The first question is, what access barriers do signers face in consuming information, communicating, and collaborating on video conferencing? The second question, what design opportunities exist for video conferencing platforms to facilitate a signer-inclusive communication environment? We conducted a remote interview protocol design to ensure our research was accessible for deaf and hard of hearing signers because the prior accessibility research highlighted how existing remote research methods were designed for the hearing community. 2 designated ASL interpreters were hired to interpret for all sessions to ensure consistency and familiarity with the nuances of this research. And we recruited 10 participants for 2 sets of pilot studies. Finally, we made key adaptations for the study after validating our protocol. For this presentation, we'll share the top 3 today. The first, establish communication rules for the co-design workshops to avoid multiple signers signing at the same time. Also, a 1-to-1 ratio of deaf participants to research interpreters, so the research interpreters do not feel visually and cognitively overwhelmed while tracking multiple signers at the same time. And the third, one of the hearing researchers acts as a design assistant, digitally sketching on a tablet in real time while participants describe their ideas. Our screener was sent to the deaf and interpreter communities via email lists, snowball sampling, and social media posts. We selected 8 deaf signers who prefer communicating with ASL primarily, and 8 freelance ASL interpreter participants who had been working in person before COVID. We first conducted a 60-minute interview with individual participants to understand their video conferencing experience. Then we conducted a 90-minute workshop with 4 groups of participants to understand their unique needs. Lastly, we conducted reflexive thematic analysis and visual analysis of our data. And Jazz will take over and move forward with the presentation.
Thanks, Anna. So our participants have shared accessibility barriers in video conferencing use that we had categorized into these 4 categories. For this presentation, we will focus on the first 2 findings, consuming information and communicating. We will also share design recommendations generated from these workshops that aim to make video conferencing platforms more accessible for signers. So let's start off with the first, consuming information. So one of the top recurring themes that was reinforced by signers and interpreters is the difficulty in locating signers in video conferencing platforms. D1 explained that when there are more people in the room, they would have to swipe screens to get the view of other people. And signers like D3 shared that, I'm not sure who's signing, I'm not sure who's talking. And the delay in locating signers have caused participants like interpreter 10 to miss information that should have been interpreted to their clients. D4 often like to look at a person who's making a comment to capture non-manual markers such as like facial expression. However, because of how the thumbnails are arranged, D4 also said that when I look at that person, then I miss the next part of the interpreted message because I'm not looking at the interpreter at that moment. So the next theme is the difficulty comprehending signs and visual cues. Many realize that signing in the 2D plane has limited their signing space to articulate their message clearly. One example is the inability to use body positioning to convey important ASL grammatical expressions. D2 explained that video conferencing took away the ability to use body shift for clarity as everyone is randomly laid out on a 2D space. While hearing people can assume the listener's understanding through both verbal and non-verbal back-channel feedback, signers also explain that they have to rely on the single source of feedback, which is non-verbal. And it's a lot of jumping around and it takes a lot of effort. So one of the design ideas is group videos. In the sketch, our participants imagine the ability to create private groups of signers and interpreters so that if the screens are rearranged or if they get sent to breakout rooms, D16 said that the interpreter moves with me instead of getting lost in the shuffle of the screens. And then next, we'll share the themes under communication. Signers have described the difficulties trying to get attention of other signers because existing platforms are designed to identify participation through audio. D5 summarized it well, saying that hearing people just hear something and they're able to recognize that someone's getting their attention. However, deaf people don't have similar access. Also, video conferencing platforms do not automatically identify active signers, which can cause interpreters to overlook signers, and D2 recounted an experience where they were signing and it was dead silent in the room and realized that the interpreter actually didn't see that they were trying to make a comment. Interpreters often ask signers to clarify their intent, but this back and forth also becomes difficult on video conferencing platform. This also increases the struggle to interject a conversation online. One of the signers also shared how often they get overstepped by others and then answer the question before they could even get the interpreter's attention and interject. So one of the design idea is to have non-auditory means to get signers' attention privately. D16 wanted some buttons to push to get others' attention, and D1 did that having it pop out on my screen if that's possible. So as we look to a world where video conferencing remains a mainstay of work, education, and social life, we hope that future work can help shape a medium that more fully supports visual communication. First, future work can explore creating and evaluating prototypes based on the design opportunities highlighted by our participants. Since the scope of our research is within commercially used video conferencing platforms, future work can investigate if the insights and recommendation can be extended to other remote interpreting settings. And lastly, it will be valuable for future research to study the potential impact of video conferencing mediated communication on young people whose linguistic foundation in sign language is being built via a two-dimensional medium. So with that, thank you so much for staying with us till the very end, and feel free to ask us any questions. Thank you.